So a lot of solo home buyers, when they are making their first property purchase or when they are deciding whether or not to buy a property, they become so confused and overwhelmed by all the information they've seen, all the sources they've read, and they end up doing a few things. Number one, either they make a rash decision to buy a property, and 4 to 5 years later they realize that they made a wrong decision because either they had to sell at profit, it was hard to sell, or it was just a break even. It was as if they didn't even make any money for the past 4 to 5 years, but they have already grown older 4 to 5 years. Secondly, some of them are so paralyzed by all the decision making, they're so fatigued by it that they don't even take action, and they end up just missing the market in totality. And when they want to finally take action to buy their property, it becomes too expensive and they are forever catching up to the new price. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you how to make use of checklists to eradicate emotional factors, to make sure that you have covered all the blind spots, and so that you can make a decision with more confidence. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm Zoe. I've been a real estate consultant for the past 5 years and counting, and have helped 70 plus families transit and expand their real estate portfolio. So we often look at professional doctors, professional surgeons who uses checklists whenever they are going to embark on a very important surgery, or whether they are going to take off the plane, etc. So likewise, I think having a checklist helps you to make sure that you have identified all the factors, and to make sure that you have fully covered what you needed to cover before making a decision. So we had a recent buyer who came to us buying his first property. He was in his late 20s. There was anxiety. He was busy at work. He had no time to analyze. Even though he was very numbers driven, he roughly knew what kind of price to enter. But still, there were so many factors to consider that he was just wanting a second opinion. He needed a sounding board. And perhaps that could be you at this current juncture. So when he came to us, we became like the sounding board. We sat down with him to strategize, to have a tabletop discussion before we even started looking at homes. So traditionally, a lot of people like to just look at a budget, look at what the loan can afford them, and just scroll through the property guru to see what is out there before making a decision, without looking at all the other factors that are equally or even more important. So a checklist helps you to make sure that you cover all these grounds. So when we met him, the first thing that we did was, number one on the checklist is first have an idea of the benchmark pricing to compare our analysis against. So in this case, he wanted to buy a 2-bed, 2-bath. And we first compare a basket of projects that had 2-bed, 2-bath. We look at the transacted prices, and these projects are particularly close to MRT and in the outside regions of central Singapore, because that will then give us a benchmark of how to compare our pricing with. So with that in mind, we then identified like which areas of the outside of core central Singapore has value. It is transacting at a lower PSF, even though it is also close to MRT. It also tells us exactly which areas are potentially the value buy areas. Next, having identified the area, we then zoom into the different districts and the regions. So for example, we have zoomed into a certain project, particularly a certain unit, and we want to analyze the price to see whether it makes sense. So first and foremost, before you even want to trigger making an offer to secure the unit itself, we go through the checklist, which is second on the list, and that is pricing. Pricing is very key. So if it doesn't even cut through, if it doesn't even pass through the second point on the checklist, then the rest of the checklist actually we don't even have to consider. So when we look at pricing, first we look at the project itself. We will ask ourselves whether the asking price has already been transacted in the past 3 months for that same layout type, same size. Of course, we have to factor in the facing, factor in the floor level, so that we have a better holistic understanding. So if it has already been transacted, then good, it is safe. But of course, if not, we add a plus 5% buffer so that we cater for the price upward trends when we are doing this sourcing, when we are doing this tabletop discussion. We need to be clear that prices are continuing to trend upwards. So we want to make sure that we're not priced up when we eventually are ready to pull the trigger. Number two, after we look at the project itself, we look at the surrounding projects to see how they are performing. Are they profitable? We look at the number of transactions. And then we also ask ourselves whether or not the current asking price of this particular unit is it comparable with all these projects given the same location attributes? If it's comparable, it's good. We are safe. That means we are buying into a market sort of price. We're not overpaying. We then look at the pricing of projects that's closer to the MRT within the same region, so that we want to see disparity. Like for our region here, for our area here, as compared to those projects that's closer to the MRT, I want to see disparity. There should be a gap. If there is no gap, it means that whatever I'm paying right here, I might as well pay for something that's closer to amenities, closer to convenience. So the disparity I want to look at is, if it's more than 10%, it's great. More than 5%, okay. Yeah. But I want to see disparity. That will give me an idea of the price I'm paying for. Then fourthly, as part of the pricing category itself, I will then compare it with the new launches in the area. I will first look at the pricing or the PSF of this current asking. I will reset the lease to as if it was built this year. I will also compare it with the new launches. I'll also then compare the new condo prices. I want to see disparity again. Because if there is disparity of more than 10%, it's great. That means I am not paying the same price as what I'll get for a new condo. If the pricing checks off the boxes, then I'll move on to the next part, which is layout. Because this is going to be an interim home, it is an investment home, it is something I want to make sure I have an easy time to sell with greater capital appreciation potential. So I will first make sure that whatever I'm holding on caters to a wide enough audience when I want to exit 4 to 5 years later, or even longer. So I want to make sure my layout type is as regular as possible. I want to avoid niche layout types that cater to a small group of audience. So typically, if it's an interim home, it's not my final home. I want to avoid ground floor, penthouses, duplex, loft. Not saying that they're not good, it's just that in this season, because I want to make sure I can transit and pivot in the next one easily, I want to cater to a wide audience as much as I can right now in this season. I will also go for layout types that's more straightforward, like it's a 2-bed, 2-bath. Instead of a 1+30, I will go for a 3-bedder instead of a 2+30, because I don't want my future buyers to be in a dilemma to choose between my unit or a 3-bedder or a 1+30 versus a 2-bedder. Likewise, when it comes to bathrooms, I want to make sure that it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, for example, and not like a 2-bed, 1-bath, because I don't want my future buyer to have to be in a dilemma and then not consider our unit. Then I'll also look at whether or not I can buy as big a layout type as possible, because I want to make sure I can cater to family profiles as much as I can, because families tend to be more willing to spend more to cater to family needs, and therefore a bit more potential to stretch their budget. I'll also look at this particular layout type to identify whether or not if there are some things that are not so ideal, is it common in the area? So for example, for this particular buyer that we helped, he was looking for 2-bed, 2-bath. And for this particular project, the 2 bathrooms were both mechanically ventilated, meaning to say they both didn't have windows for natural ventilation. So I need to make sure that, number one, within the project, is it common for this layout type to have mechanical ventilation? So yes, it was okay. So okay, it wasn't so much of a red flag. But I'll also take one step further to see whether for that region, are the condos in the surrounding also having the same kind of layout, like the 2-bed, 2-baths are also mechanically ventilated. If it is, then I know that my unit does not stick out like a sore thumb when I want to sell in future. It will not be a stumbling block. Now, after I've taken a look at the pricing, after I've taken a look at the layout, then I will look at my exit audience. I want to see for my area itself, when I want to sell in future, am I close to BTO HDB upgraded pool as much as possible? Because these are the people with the BTO effect who will have more finances to be able to upgrade to a resale condo. So I will want to be close to new clusters as much as I can. Number two, I also ask myself, for the price that I intend to sell in future, buffering the inflation, buffering the reasonable growth, would my future audience be able to accept that pricing? Or is it a pricing that becomes a little bit too much for my future buyer pool? So then that tells me whether or not the area is worth for me to consider further, as compared to perhaps another area where the HDB upgraded pool is not able to stomach the kind of future price I'm talking about. And of course, the next thing I want to look at in my exit audience is I will take a look at the new launches in the area or the government land sales, so as to predict roughly what kind of price trend that area is going to experience. Because having a price trend upwards will help uplift the whole entire area, and that's usually caused when there is new launches in the area to uplift the whole area, because new condos set a new benchmark pricing. But having said that, not all new launches are created the same. So we also need to be very mindful whether or not that particular new launch is something of a higher potential to uplift the prices even more. And finally, before I pull the trigger, I will ask myself, for this investment figure that I'm about to pump into this project, having gone through the checklist earlier, can I find something even better, closer to town, closer to MRT, with a better layout, bigger layout, in a better project, or in a project with safer attributes? If I can find something like that, I know that I've not optimized my finances yet, I've not optimized my funds yet, I will take a look at that project and do a deep dive again, run through the checklist again. If I can't find anything else, and this is the best optimal decision that I can make, then I am confident that having run through this checklist, this is a decision that's not rushed into. I have gone through the checklist, I've analyzed it, I've taken time to make sure that this is the most optimized decision for me right now in this season. So that's how we helped our buyer secure his property, by going through this checklist, by helping him to run through step by step. This helps to allay anxieties, because you know that you did not rush into a decision, and that your decision is founded on analysis, and that gave him the confidence to purchase his first investment property, setting off to a great start to his property portfolio. So do make use of this checklist when you can, and I hope you found it useful.